Mr. Speaker. Tonight the country is facing great challenges. The challenges of Obamacare, of runaway spending here in Washington, and of our fiscal crisis that's increasing our debt over and over again. Now is the time for solutions, and now is the opportunity that we have to get things right and to turn things around. I'm looking forward tonight to visiting with my colleagues about the challenges we have before us as well as the opportunities. This situation that we're in today kind of reminds me of a story that I heard a few years ago, and I think it's very fitting to this time in history. This is a true story. There was a man who went hunting with his dog many years ago. And as he walked through the great outdoors and came back from his hunting trip, he noticed that his pants were covered with something that in Missouri we call cockleburrs. And if you're not from Missouri or that part of the country, it's basically a weed and it leaves very prickly seed pods that are about the size of a dime, and they will stick to anything from your clothes to your pet's fur or anything else that happens to brush against it as it passes by the weed. So this man got to looking at all of these cockleburrs on his pants and his dog when he got back, and he was trying to pull them off and clean them off. And then he stopped a minute and got to look at that cockleburr, and he got to thinking, what is it that causes this cockleburr to stick so well? And he wondered, is there a way we could use that same format to help provide some solutions? He thought about some friends who had arthritis that had trouble buttoning up their shirt and or zipping things. He thought about young children, and they had trouble fastening things together. And he thought, I wonder if we could take this challenge of this cockleburr and make an opportunity out of it. And you know what? He did. He invented something we all use every day called Velcro. And he laid the groundwork for what I think we need to do here in Washington, is take the challenges before us and use it as an opportunity in this point in history to create a better health care system that addresses the Americans' needs, that gets spending under control, makes government more efficient and more effective, and that also addresses our long-term debt and reverses course so that we will get out of debt as a nation and balance the budget. This is the opportunity that we have before us. I wanted to, before my colleagues shared their thoughts on this, I wanted to talk just a minute about the challenges that we have in Obamacare. There are so many reasons that at this time in history we've been taking a stand here in the House and saying it is time to reverse this onerous policy because the American people don't want it and it's hurting them. I wanted to share at least 7 things that are challenging about this law. The first thing is that Obamacare is causing an increase in premiums. I got last week an email from a constituent who sells insurance back home. And they were very distraught because they had a constituent come in, or a customer, who wanted to renew their health insurance. And after they figured out what it would mean through Obamacare, they discovered this customer was going to have to pay $1,500 a month. And that isn't even the full premium their employer would pay some others. So when you added it all up, this family, she had to tell them, was going to have to pay $18,000 a year for their health care. Now this makes the difference in that family whether they can send a child to college or not. It's wrong. We need to have some solutions here. Something else I heard today. I was visiting with a constituent who told me that they went on the exchanges to see what Obamacare would do to their health care premiums. What she found out is that her insurance next year is going to cost $200 more a month than she's paying right now. Plus, she's going to have a larger deductible, and her coverage is going to decrease. So she was obviously very upset. Obamacare is increasing premiums and increasing costs on Americans. That's wrong. It's time for solutions. Number 2, Obamacare is killing jobs. Despite what others on the other side of the aisle say, it is killing jobs. 1 in 5 small businesses report that they're letting employees go due to the new law. Others are deciding not to expand their business due to the new law. The Gallup survey this year found a staggering 41% of small business owners are holding off hiring new employees due to Obamacare, and 38% have pulled back on plans to grow their business. I have an example I wanted to share with you from my own district. I was visiting with a small business owner the other day. They're doing pretty well. They have a small business. It's been growing. And the exciting thing is, they said, Representative Hartzler, we want to open up a second location. We want to hire some new workers. We're very excited about it. But they looked at Obamacare and the requirements involved, and they said, we cannot afford it. If we open up the second location, hire new workers, we're not going to be able to keep going. And so they decided not to expand their business. Now, the thing that makes this extra tragic is in this town, there have been a manufacturing plant closed down over the last few years. There are hundreds of people in my district looking for work who would love to have that job. But because of Obamacare, they're not going to be able to do it. This business owner wants to expand, but they can't. That's wrong. Obamacare is killing jobs. That's why it's time for solutions. Number 3, Obamacare is reducing the take-home pay. You know, it's been many years since many Americans have got a raise. They're making do, but if anybody goes to the store like I do every weekend and buys groceries and other things for your family, you know that things are costing more and more. So we have a real problem here. Americans aren't getting pay increases, and yet the cost of living is going up. There are many businesses that are cutting back on their employees' hours because of Obamacare to get them under the 30-hour requirement. In fact, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business study showed that 27% of businesses have and will cut hours to reduce from full-time employees to part-time. So we're becoming part-time America because of this law. Just today, I got an email from a large business owner in Missouri. And here's what they said. It validates this very point. It says, as one of the largest outstate employers in Missouri, we are not expanding or hiring. Our health insurance costs will increase by an estimated $800,000 in 2014 due to Obamacare. Despite significant reductions in coverage for our employees and reducing hours to less than 30 hours per week where we can. Our taxes have gone up, regulations are overwhelming, there's no end in sight. It is happening. Number 4, Obamacare is jeopardizing our personal security and our privacy. How would you like to have your Social Security number made available to everybody? According to an August 7th Forbes magazine article, it says, in order for Obamacare to work, the government will need to know a lot about your financial, medical, employment situation, and this could very well, Obamacare's exchanges, end up illegally exposing Americans' private records to hackers and criminals. Just last week, when Obamacare went online, McAfee, which is one of the nation's premier internet security companies, they tweeted out that Obamacare is a hacker's dream. This is very, very concerning. It's clearly time for solutions. 5, Obamacare is simply not working. I'm sure many of you have heard the news reports. This is just a 4-page outline of all the different headlines from around the country about how this is not working. Florida, it says the glitches in this new electronic healthcare sign-up system almost began immediately and they never let up. Missouri, it says, but in Kansas and Missouri is more in a fizzle than a bang. North Dakota says that he and his staff were monitoring the federal website Tuesday but were unable to access it. West Virginia says 10 hours later, after 2 attempts at signing up and 1 45-minute call with a federal agent, technical glitches have prevented a 60-year-old grandfather from purchasing a plan. It goes on and on. There are real problems there. Thank you, Alexis. And Obamacare is unfair. You know, President Obama has exempted big business from having to comply with Obamacare for a year, and he's granted over 1,300 waivers. Yet he hasn't given a waiver to the hardworking American public who deserves it. That is not fair. And lastly, something that a lot of people don't know, but a lot of people care about, or should care about, is that Obamacare uses tax dollars to pay for abortions for the first time, and it hides the fact that people will be paying for abortions in their monthly bill. Here's how it works. The law says that at least one policy in every exchange has to cover abortion. But it also says, the law says, that they can only disclose that as part of the huge summary of benefits and all the fine print that is there at only the time of initial sign-up. So many people right now are going online and they're looking, they've got these policies that come up, there's all these fine print. They don't even know that that policy includes abortion. Well, Obamacare is going to have subsidies to help people pay for their premium. That subsidy comes from our tax dollars. Many Americans do not want their hard-earned tax dollars to go and pay for abortion, yet it will. And sadly, the people many times will not even know if their policy has abortion or not. There are many Americans who support life, and when they go to buy it directly, they will not know. But inside the bill, not only does it cover abortion, but Obamacare has what's called a secrecy clause in it that specifically says that that charge for the abortion fee cannot be listed in their monthly bill. So many pro-life Americans who value life unknowingly will buy an insurance policy that is covering abortion, and every month they will be paying their own hard-earned dollars to go towards abortion. It's just wrong. So clearly we need some solutions. And you know, Republicans do have solutions. We are putting forth a health care bill that replaces, and is better than Obamacare. It allows for increased access and lower cost. And you're going to be hearing more about it in the days to come. But we call it the American Health Care Reform Act. There are better solutions. So we've got a lot of challenges with Obamacare, but this is our opportunity to make it better for the American people. And that's what we're going to do. We also have the challenge of huge debt crisis at this time in history. I know many of my colleagues here are going to share about that. But we've got to quit spending money we don't have. People at home are tightening their belt. It's time for Washington to do that too. And this is where we're at tonight, Monday night, October 14th, 2013. How this is going to play out, we don't know. But I know I'm going to continue to fight for positive solutions that are good for the American people. I'm going to be looking for opportunities to take the cuckoos of life and look at it and say, is there a way we can turn this around and make something good out of it? And I believe that's where we are right now. We can make something good of this situation. It's been hard on Americans. It's hard on families. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's been hard on us as members of Congress. But we can make something better than has ever happened before from this country. We can produce a health care bill that the American people deserve. We can rein in this runaway spending and get it right, make government more efficient and more effective. And we can address our debt crisis. We can do it. That is our challenge. That is our opportunity. That's why we're fighting. That's why we're here tonight. And I want to thank my colleagues who've stayed tonight to share their thoughts on this important time in history, this Monday night that we're at. And I'd like to yield to my friend from Utah, Chris Stewart. Go ahead.
I would like to thank the gentlewoman, Representative Hartzler, for sharing the floor with myself and other colleagues tonight. It's an honor, and especially on a topic that all of us know and recognize that is so very, very important. Dean Acheson once said, "The negotiation in the classic diplomatic sense assumes parties are more anxious to agree than they are to disagree." For the past 2 weeks, President Obama and Senator Harry Reid have made it very, very clear that they are much more anxious to disagree than they are to agree with the Republicans. A situation that has very honestly prevented sincere negotiations. It's impossible to work out a deal when one party just sits on the sidelines and won't talk, like we have experienced over the last few weeks with the President. Now, we heard rumors this afternoon that the President has finally begun to negotiate with the Republicans. I hope that that is true, because our founding fathers established a system that was intended to be deliberative. Whether you agree or disagree with the President, this much we know. He has been willing to push our nation toward an economic crisis, all for the sake of a political agenda. When this happens, every American loses. It doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. For 14 years, I was an Air Force pilot. which was, by the way, the coolest job in the world. I loved doing that. At one point, I was selected to be a member of the START verification team, Strategic Arm Reduction Talks. Of course, we were working with the Russians during this time. They would come to my base to verify that we had complied with elements of the START treaty. Now, during the 1990s, the Russians were not our friends. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, I would cautiously add that today the Russians are not our friends either. Now, these were, in some cases, tense and very carefully orchestrated events. But we did them. We extended a hand of trust and fellowship between two nations that had very little in common, that had much to lose if they did not develop a working relationship. Now, Mr. Speaker, if we could do it then between the Russian and the U.S. military, surely we, with the Republicans and the President, we could do the same thing now. The President is the leader of this nation. He has a responsibility to lead. But part of leadership is being willing to sit down and in a sincere way be willing to listen to the other side. And the President has failed in this responsibility, and the nation has paid a price. Before being elected to Congress, I was the president and owner of a small company. Now, being part of a small business means developing relationships that are built upon trust. With the disastrous rollout of Obamacare, the President has clearly broken the trust of the American people. $634 million. $634 million. That's how much it cost to develop Obamacare website. Facebook operated for 6 years on less money than that. Twitter was launched and operated for less than half the cost. Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, all were designed, implemented, and operational at a fraction of the price of Obamacare webpage. And yet, in one of the most embarrassing moments in Obamacare history, and I believe this will be a history that will be rife with embarrassing moments, news organizations had to search high and low throughout the country to find one person last week who could be verified that they had actually signed up on the Obamacare webpage. And, of course, days later, we had born the legend of Chad, something that many people are very familiar with. Harkening back to my military days, if I had been given a mission and had so utterly failed to accomplish that mission, I would have been held accountable. So I ask, Mr. Speaker, when will Kathleen Sebelius be held accountable for this disaster? After more than 3 years and after more than $630 million and a failure to launch such as this, why does she still have her job? But let's remember this. At the end of the day, we're not talking about Obamacare, and we're not really talking about a web page or sequester or a yearly continuing resolutions. What we're really talking about at the end of the day is our nation's crushing national debt. Our national debt is now approaching $17 trillion. Now, President Obama congratulates himself on having reduced the debt by half. But listen, when you run up a debt of 1 year in office of $1.2 or $1.3 trillion, when you have nearly 4 years in a row of a greater than $1 trillion annual deficit, and then you congratulate yourself because you cut it to $600 or $700 billion, that is not something to celebrate. Now is the time to work together towards a balanced budget and actually beginning to pay down that debt. Yeah, this is a tough decision, but we were elected to make tough decisions. My plea to the Senate and to the President is please come to the table. Let's start the conversation now about how we can put our fiscal house in order. Time is running out. And with that, once again, Ms. Hartzler, thank you for letting me share the time with you, and I yield back my time.
You bet. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate your perspective as a former Air Force pilot. I think what you said about leadership is very, very true, and it's time for the President to show some leadership and for us to get together and to talk about this, and that's why it is time for solutions. So thanks for sharing those things. Now I want to yield some time to my good friend from Louisiana, Steve Scalise, who is chairman of the Republican Study Committee and a real leader here in this House, and I certainly appreciate you sharing tonight. So I yield my time to you.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler, for her leadership as the chair of the RSC's Communications Committee for leading this effort to talk about real solutions. And of course, today we're in day 14 of a government shutdown, a shutdown that has seen Republicans bring proposal after proposal after proposal to fund government. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out there are more than 20 bills now that have been passed by the House of Representatives to fund all or parts of the federal government. 20 bills. This chronicles the timeline going back to September 20th, by the way, well in advance of the midnight hour, where today on day 14, by the way, President Obama has still yet to even engage in conversations. In fact, we went to the White House Thursday to meet with the President, sat in a room with him for an hour and a half. Simple offer was, Mr. President, we'll increase the debt ceiling. All we're asking is for you to start talking, just to agree to have conversations. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we left that meeting without the President even being willing to start talking. And so we're 14 days into a government shutdown that the President's decrying. He's calling people names. You've got people in the White House literally calling people suicide bombers, terrorists, and all kind of other things that are so unbecoming of the office of the President of the United States. Again, a President who said he was going to change the tone in Washington, allowing people in his White House to call people on the opposition terrorists and suicide bombers. And yet he refuses to even sit at the table and negotiate our differences while we've passed 20 different bills to fund all or parts of government. And what are some of those parts of government? Bill to fund Veterans Affairs. Now, Mr. Speaker, for all the areas of disagreement we have in Washington, and clearly with a divided nation, with divided government, there are areas where we have disagreement. But we should all be able to come to the table and say we ought to fund our veterans while we're negotiating our differences on the things that we disagree upon. And yet we sent the bill over to the Senate to fund our veterans, and Harry Reid tabled that bill, Mr. Speaker. We sent a bill to say disaster aid shouldn't be something that we disagree over. We passed a bill with bipartisan votes, sent it over to the Senate. In fact, we saw maybe one of the most disgraceful acts by Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Speaker, where for days we saw this administration refusing to give death benefits to our fallen heroes. A moment I don't think we've seen in our nation's history. And we passed a bill to say, don't hold our veterans hostage. And yet you still see barricades, I call them Obamacades, up in front of the World War II memorial, an open-air memorial, where in normal days there's nobody there being paid to guard or block this memorial. It's an open-air memorial built by our World War II heroes. And yet, when our World War II heroes come from all around the country, some in their 90s, come to see their memorial, they're greeted by barricades by this administration. And this is the kind of embarrassing leadership that we're getting out of the White House when all we're saying is, let's negotiate our differences like has always been done. When Ronald Reagan was president, Tip O'Neill was the speaker, you had divided government. There were 12 different shutdowns, by the way, during that time in our country's history. And what Ronald Reagan did as a leader, as a great leader, one we surely miss today, Ronald Reagan started having regular meetings with Tip O'Neill. They actually built a relationship, started getting things done, and we saw one of the greatest revolutions, economic expansions in our country's history, because you had real leadership in the White House. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're still saying, again, we've sent 20 different bills over to the Senate, all chronicled, many of which had large Democrat votes out of the House. Still to this day, not one word from the President over whether he'll even agree to start talking. And of course, he wants to make it all about Obamacare. And clearly, there are big areas where we have disagreement, But it's not just a partisan issue. It's not just Republicans that have issues with Obamacare. Let's start with the occupant of the Oval Office. Barack Obama has problems with Obamacare. He's issued over 1,200 waivers to his signature law, as a gentlelady from Missouri pointed out. 1,200 waivers. I've yet to find one small business in my district who got one of those waivers, by the way. It was handed out to a lot of special interest friends who could get access to the White House. Is that the way the government's supposed to run? In fact, he even worked out a deal to give members of Congress an exemption from his signature health care law. So what we're saying, Mr. Speaker, is why don't we at least start with the basic premise of fairness, that if this law is so good, make it apply to everybody. If it's not that good, if it's so bad you need to issue 1,200 waivers to your friends, Mr. Speaker, then why not give that same waiver to all Americans? All Americans, until this thing's ready to work, which clearly it's not. As somebody once said, the failures of this law, October 1st was a date that for 3 years they knew was coming, where these exchanges had to be up and running, and now we're hearing debacle after debacle, people still registering 12, 14 times without even being able to get through. Somebody said it's like flowers.com not being prepared for Valentine's Day, Mr. Speaker. And so, as we stand here today talking about getting our economy back on track, talking about the 20 different proposals we have sent over to the Senate to get government up and running, most of which haven't even been given a minute's consideration, literally tabled on party line votes by Senator Reid. What we're saying is, how about just fairness? Let's start with fairness and make Obamacare apply to everybody. If it's that good, why don't we make it apply to everybody? Get rid of all these special waivers, all these special backroom deals to everybody from the president's friends to members of Congress. Let's make this apply to everybody. Let's get the government back open. Let's start tackling our long-term spending problems that are causing programs like Medicare and Social Security to face bankruptcy, where we've put good plans on the table to save those programs from bankruptcy and, frankly, Mr. Speaker, to save our country from bankruptcy so we can hand off to our kids and grandkids the same opportunity that we enjoy today in the greatest country in the history of the world, a country that's facing serious problems, a country unfortunately facing a lack of leadership from the president, who 14 days into a government shutdown still to this day has not even agreed to start talking with people from the other party to work out those differences. So again, I thank the gentlelady from Missouri for creating this forum to talk about solutions, and my other colleagues in the Republican Study Committee that have been bringing forward solution after solution to get our economy moving again and restore the greatness that this country knows is there, that beacon of light that we're all fighting for here tonight on the House floor. And with that, I yield back to the gentlelady from Missouri.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Well said. Talking about the leadership that we have been providing here in the House, I think it's very important that people know we proactively worked to make sure government stays open. We passed these bills way before October 1st. Unfortunately, we haven't had leadership from the White House or from the Senate willing to come together. But thank you for bringing that up. And in fact, something that a lot of people don't know is at this point in the House of Representatives, we have already passed 1/3 of all appropriations bills in the continuing resolution. We have been passing bill after bill to keep this government open, to fund it, to make sure it keeps going and working for the American people. The Senate hasn't passed it. They haven't taken them up. So it's not us that's, shut down the government or responsible for this lapse in funding, and it's certainly not us that's keeping it shut. But thank you very much for sharing that. And now I yield my time to Randy Weber from Texas. We're really glad to have you here tonight and appreciate what you have to share.
I thank the gentlelady from Missouri, and Mr. Speaker, it's good to be here. Mr. Speaker, since 1978, the debt ceiling has been raised 53 times. 27 of these increases have been used as a negotiating tool both by Congress and the President. So why not now, Mr. President? Can we not negotiate now? And to borrow a somewhat trite phrase from days gone by, yes, we can. Sadly, today we have a president who does not want to make any concessions with House Republicans, Mr. Speaker. You know, Thomas Jefferson once said, "Pride cost us more than hunger, thirst, and cold." Has pride gotten in the way clouding the judgment of our president, do you think, Mr. Speaker? Has this president chosen party politics and his unworkable health care law over working with House Republicans toward fair solutions that would help hard-working Americans keep more money in their pockets? Mr. Speaker, think with me here for a second. During a debt ceiling debate in March of 2006, then Senator Obama said, and I quote, "The fact that we are here today to debate raising Americans' debt limit is a sign of leadership failure. It is a sign that the U.S. government cannot pay its own bills. It is a sign that we now depend on ongoing financial assistance from foreign countries to finance our government's reckless fiscal policies. Increasing America's debt weakens us domestically and internationally." He went on to say, Mr. Speaker, that leadership means that the buck stops here. Instead, Washington is shifting the burden of bad choices today onto the backs of our children and grandchildren. He said, "America has a debt problem and a failure of leadership. Americans deserve better." And I end his quote. Yet, here we are, 7 years later, and we are debating the exact same thing. Why is that okay now? I would ask him, Mr. Speaker. Why is that okay now, Mr. President? Do we have a failure of leadership? Can we admit that? Yes, we can. It's a failure of leadership also for spewing such venomous rhetoric when the governing process doesn't go your way, calling Republicans names. It's a failure of not listening to the American people. Can we call this a failure of leadership? Yes, we can. The American people want the government reopened. They want to make their own health care decisions. The shutdown the American people want is the out-of-control government spending, the $17 trillion debt that's been amassed, that the president in his own words said is a failure of leadership, and in another instance, unpatriotic. Mr. Speaker, House Republicans have put forth proposal after proposal to fund this government, to keep it open, to protect the American people from the president's hostile takeover of the health care system. Sadly, still, Mr. Speaker, we have a president and a Senate Majority Leader acting like petulant children, refusing to come to the table to negotiate, prolonging that failure of leadership. Each day that passes with the Affordable Care Act going into effect, our nation's fiscal health gets worse. A failure of leadership. I love America too much to let it fall under these circumstances. I will not stand by and watch as our country crumbles because of a president who is not willing to work with us and come to the table and to carry out this prolonged failure of leadership. I'm Randy Weber, and America is worth fighting for, and I thank the gentlelady from Missouri for fighting alongside me and continuing this valiant effort. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Randy. It's an honor to stand beside you in this, and it is a time for solutions. And people wonder, can we get this right? Can we make things better? Can we keep the opportunity for the future? And with you, I would say yes, we can. But we're going to keep working on it. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to yield to my friend from the Midwest, from Indiana, Marlin Stutzman. Please, what would you have to share with us tonight?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the gentlelady for yielding and for organizing this special order about solutions. And that's what the American people expect from us as Congress, whether you're Republican or whether you're Democrat. The American people are looking to Washington to find solutions, to work together to make America strong again. And so I want to thank you for your comments today and for representing your district so well. it doesn't take much to sort out and to realize the difficulties that we're facing in our country and what our federal government is facing: $17 trillion of debt, a struggling economy, a healthcare system that does need to be fixed. People are looking to Washington to gain confidence in the marketplace. And, in spite of Washington, you will find bright spots throughout the country where good things are happening. But it's not enough, though. We can still do better. And it is time for Washington to find solutions for our economy, for the American people, for American families, so that way when a family sits down to have dinner tonight, they're not going to be wondering if Dad's going to be going to work next week. They don't have to worry about, is Mom going to have her job the following month? What's going to happen after Christmas time? What's going to happen next year? They hear so many different stories about the new health care law and what does it mean for them? What's their insurance plan going to be like next year? So many unknowns, questions that are not answered because of the uncertainty that Washington has placed irresponsibly on the American people. And so while we know we have $17 trillion of debt, a deficit that is running out of balance, a health care law that is crushing the American people today, an independent payment advisory board that has 15 board members that are unelected and unaccountable, who will be making health care decisions for Americans in the near term, while the unemployment rate is still at 8%. Mandates from Obamacare are forcing companies to cut hours. Too much uncertainty is being created by our federal government. And while small businesses are trying to figure out how are they going to make ends meet next year, how are they going to plan their budget when they know the mandates and the cost of insurance continues to crush them? How are they going to create new jobs and expand their companies if regulations continue to hamper them and the new health care law continues to sidetrack them? One of the taxes that is in the health care law that is driving jobs away from Indiana is the medical device tax, also known as the pacemaker tax, the wheelchair tax. Anything that is made as a medical device, as a hip, a knee, a joint, any of these things are taxed now because of Obamacare. And it's over 20,000 jobs just in Indiana. And Warsaw, Indiana in particular, is the orthopedic capital of the world. It is the home to Zimmer, Biomet, DePuy, Paragon, so many other companies that are doing such remarkable work for the betterment of Americans. I know that my grandmother had her hip replaced before she passed away 10 years ago, and it changed her life. It gave her a new ability to enjoy life with her children and her grandchildren. This is an industry that is being harmed by Obamacare, and it's time that we take a step back and reevaluate and find new solutions. Unfortunately, this tax is putting 2,000 jobs in jeopardy in Indiana, and I believe that it's time for Washington, for the President, for the Senate, for the House to come together. Let's stop stumbling from crisis to crisis. That's not the best way to govern. The American people are tired of the way Washington has these cycles of political stunts and fiscal cliffs and all these other created, manufactured crises. And, Hoosiers know, many Americans know, that in order to get a job done, you have to sit down and figure out a way to get it done, talk about it, and then go out and do it. But Washington is broke because government spends too much and talks too little. So I think now is the time for us to get serious about our debt. We need to reform our entitlement programs. We need to work towards reforming our tax code. We have solutions. We have ideas. We can make things better for not only the American people, but for the world, if we just trust the instincts of the American people. And if we'd follow those instincts and follow the example of the American people, the federal government would be in a much better place today. So it is time for solutions, and I want to thank the gentlelady for yielding and for her leadership on this issue tonight.
You bet. Thank you very much, Marlon. That is right. It is time for solutions, and I very much appreciate you bringing up the concern with the taxes. We hadn't talked about that yet tonight, but the 20 new taxes that's in Obamacare, and especially, as you point out, the medical device tax, which is just very onerous, killing jobs all over. But the statement you said that it's going to stick with me most tonight, I hope the American people remember, I love what you just said, that Washington is broke because it spends too little, it spends too much, and it talks too little. Well said. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Now I would like to yield to my friend from Michigan, Carrie Bentley-Volio, and look forward to hearing your thoughts tonight.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the gentlelady from Missouri for the opportunity to speak on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, I stand before this chamber today to talk about the Democrat shutdown. In the House, we are standing strong to prevent Obamacare from hurting people. Just today, the Detroit Free Press, a liberal-leaning paper, reported that 2 health insurance companies are dropping the low-cost plans for 146,000 Michigan families due to Obamacare. This will cost each of these families thousands of dollars per year more to be covered by Obamacare-approved health care plans. That's unacceptable. Our government is shut down because the extreme liberal Democrats refuse to negotiate and have rejected bills to keep most of the government open. This behavior reminds me of a spoiled child having a temper tantrum who run to the room and slam the door shut, refusing to come out until their demands are met. This is no way to behave and is a disservice to all Americans. Mr. Speaker, they are obsessed with forcing health care legislation, which they are exempt from, onto the American people. They want 2 classes, the majority who live under Obamacare and the elite who use their connections to get waivers. By refusing to fund veterans, to keep the parks open, or support pediatric cancer research, Senate and House Democrats are showing whose side they're on, and it's not the American people. I plead with my responsible adult Democrat colleagues. It's not too late. Let's move forward. Join the rest of the American people and support equality under the law. Thank you. I yield back my time.
You bet. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for your leadership. I know you've been going down the World War II Memorial, helping to open up the barricades for our honor flights coming in, and it's sad that we have to do that. But thank you for your leadership in that. Now I'd like to turn to one of your colleagues from Michigan, Bill Huizenga, and yield time from him as much as he'd like.
Thanks. I appreciate my good friend from Missouri putting this together and having this conversation. This is a conversation we need to have with the American people. There's obviously a lot of misinformation that's going out over the airwaves, as we've talked about a number of times. And I think that people are looking for that information. And I know I've been tweeting out a few of the articles that have come across on my iPhone here. So for those of you out there watching, at Rep Huizenga, I'd love for you to follow me and take a look at this Time for Solutions hashtag that we have going here. Because it is talking about some of those challenges as well as the solutions I think we're all looking for. And I appreciate you pointing out to my friend and colleague from Michigan, Carrie Bentley-Volio, who is a great veteran himself of Iraq as well as earlier times, and he's done a couple of tours. And for me, that World War II memorial was something very special to be able to be a part of. That first day, there weren't television cameras around, there wasn't media, there wasn't anybody around except for those of us who cared about making sure that our veterans had an opportunity to go in and see a memorial that they earned. And I'll tell you, as someone who's the son of a disabled World War II veteran, a man who suffered a B-24 crash in Italy in 1944, I can tell you, I know how powerful it is. I know how powerful it is for him, how powerful it was for his buddies that he was able to go to the memorial with, and for me as a family member to be along on that very special day. At the least that we can do, we need to open that up. And it's not just the World War II memorial. It's the Korean memorial. I had a chance to bring a group of veterans from Grand Rapids area in my district and in and around Kentwood and those areas. And we went down to the World War II memorial. We also went to the Korean memorial. That's where most of them were. They were greeted with no crowds, but the same barricades, as well as a park ranger, who was in a very tough spot. He proceeded to tell me that, he said, Congressman, I'm here to tell you that this monument is closed, that this park is closed. And I said, well, respectfully, I'm here to tell you that I'm going to help my constituents exercise their First Amendment rights. And opened up that barricade, and we were able to get some people in there. Today, as I was coming in, I drove past the Martin Luther King Memorial. Same thing. There was buses lined up on the street with their flashers going. And there was a tremendous number of people in there exercising their First Amendment right, civil disobedience that had gone in. The gate was kicked open, and they were in there, going and seeing that memorial to a great man the way that it should be, open and available right now, without the excuses, without the rented barricades, without those other things. But I also want to touch a little bit on the health care side as we're going through this. I appreciate you saying it's not just challenges, but also the opportunities. And frankly, we need to be talking to each other to get to those solutions. This hashtag Time for Solutions is very timely. We've had a Senate leader who has said absolutely no negotiations, none. Well, now we're finally getting there. But I think because they're hearing from their constituents back home that we need you to be talking. Same with the White House. I think the White House even came around a little sooner than what the Senate leader did. But it's time to make sure that we are having these negotiations and these conversations. Well, a lot of us know the challenges. Many of them are very well known. The sign-up glitches that happened. Glitches might be charitable, shall we say, on what was going on. But something that one of my colleagues from Michigan, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, had put forward an op-ed not that long ago, and I have a copy of it here that I was reading, and he's talking about the privacy threat. If you look at the hub, the data hub that is being built, our healthcare records are going to be exposed to a tremendous number of people. Your privacy information, your private information, healthcare information, yours, mine, all the constituents that are out there watching this, their information, your information is at risk. Your information is at risk. And it's time that we do something about it. Now, who hasn't heard if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor? Well, maybe not so much. This is one of the things I just tweeted out. CNN Money today was reporting about doctor choice and Obamacare. Not so much. This is CNN. This isn't me. This is CNN. And they're saying that, for example, there was a major insurer that was offering policies in 14 different states. And what they're saying is that they're looking at the more heavier areas of population, eliminating up to half of the doctors. Think of that. Half of the doctors that currently you could go to if you had one of their off-exchange plans won't be available to you. In a lesser populated area, it's only, quote unquote, only going to be 10 or 20% of those same doctors. I can tell you, I sat for a number of years on the Michigan Rural Health Association Board of Directors as we were looking at health care issues in Michigan, especially in the rural areas. And if you are starting to limit health care choices, even more so than what they already are in some of these rural areas, the damage that is going to be done to people and that relationship that they have with their doctor and with their health care provider, a place where you maybe have to do telemedicine just to be able to get the proper diagnosis and the things that are going on. Well, we've all heard, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Maybe not so much. Oh, but the plans are going to be more affordable. Well, they had the number right. There was a discussion that this was going to save $2,500 for the average family. Unfortunately, we now know it's the right number, but the wrong direction. It's actually going to cost the average family, like mine. I've got 5 young kids. It's going to cost $2,500 additional. That's the wrong direction. Some of the lesser knowns. I'll give you an example of my nephew Andrew. My nephew Andrew is putting himself through college. He's working as a waiter in a nice restaurant. A couple of months ago, they called everybody in for the staff meeting and said, by the way, we're going to be starting this soon, no more than 29 hours per week. No more than 29 hours per week. And he said, Uncle Bill, I can get through this. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be my choice, but I can get through it. But he's looking at these colleagues, these single moms that are saying, now where do I go for another 10 hours? Now how do I figure out where I'm going to make ends meet and how I'm going to make ends meet? I think that's why we've seen letters by those big Republican organizations like SEIU, the Teamsters, the AFL-CIO. Not exactly institutions normally related and associated with the Republican Party. They have put in formal letters saying, wait a minute, this is not being implemented the way that it was supposed to be implemented. They are afraid that there's an attack on the 40-hour work week. As well they should be afraid. As well they should be afraid. That's exactly what is happening right now. And we need to be making sure that we're pushing back at that. The medical device tax has been brought up a little bit. This has a significant impact in Michigan. Stryker Corporation out of Kalamazoo area. They have said publicly that it is going to cost them 1,000 jobs. 1,000 jobs. All right? It's also going to be hundreds of millions of dollars in new taxes that are being laid on. This Obamacare tax, it's been deemed a tax by the Supreme Court. So let's talk about it in the terms of a tax. It's time that we repeal this tax. It's time that we not take those 1,000 jobs away from Stryker. Time that we not take those jobs out of Ann Arbor, an innovative hub. Time that we not take those jobs away from the next entrepreneur in Grand Rapids on Pill Hill, Medical Mile, as it's sometimes called. We make sure that they've got the same opportunities, not less opportunity, the same opportunities. That isn't going to happen under this. And as you had pointed out, coverage, the mandatory, forced coverage of abortive services that is mandated in this bill is absolutely wrong. I have a company that is gaining some prominence in my district called AutoCam. And John Kennedy, the majority stakeholder and president and CEO of AutoCam, was just in Washington sharing his story last week. As a devout Catholic, he had made the decision that wasn't going to be something that he would offer in his plans. They're self-insured, and if his employees wanted to go do that, and that was their choice. But he wasn't going to be forced to pay for it until this bill came along and said, it doesn't matter what your personal beliefs are. It doesn't matter that you own the company. It doesn't matter that your religion says this is wrong. We know better. This government knows better. And we're going to force you to spend that money to provide a service that you wholeheartedly disagree with. Does that sound like the American way to you? Does that sound like the American way to any of us? Absolutely not. Yet somehow we're viewing this as acceptable. Waivers for the politically connected has been talked about. As long as you've got a good friend that's either in the White House or at Health and Human Services, we can probably work something out for you. Now, how does that feel? Now, today, though, we finally maybe got to the root of it. The Senate had been going along, no negotiations, no negotiations, no negotiations. Oh, but if you want to spend some more money, if you want to roll back those automatic across-the-board cuts that we had agreed to 2 years ago, maybe we'll start talking about some reforms. That's what it is, as we've talked about. This is about spending. This is about a group of people that want to see government grow. They want to see the footprint of the government just smash down on top of everything here and take control of our daily lives. That is really what the problem is. And so now we're seeing what the Senate's really all about. It's about spending. It's about more spending and more control for them. Now, that's got to stop. Now, the opportunity side. Now, I want to wrap up because I know we've got some other colleagues that are here, and we're having a great conversation. And again, appreciate your hashtag, the Time for Solutions, because this really is about those opportunities. As you talked about the invention of Velcro and how we got there. You know, I've learned that most of the times you learn more from the things in life that are tough, not the easy things. Major shifts in society are not easy. They might be simple, but sometimes those simple things aren't real easy. Well, this is neither simple nor easy, and it's because it's the wrong direction. First and foremost, we need the White House to acknowledge these problems. They won't even acknowledge these problems. It's all hunky-dory, peaches and cream here in Washington, D.C. Yep, we're rolling this program out. Excuse us, we had to make sure that you don't worry about those, quote, glitches that were in the system as we rolled it out. Please don't look at those exemptions and carve-outs that we've had, and please don't, whatever you do, please don't talk about how this is a growing frustration that the American people have, because that would somehow acknowledge that the American people might know better than they do down at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You know, we have to acknowledge those problems, and words speak louder than, actions speak louder than words. You know, the words are everything's fine. The actions are very, very different, though. The actions are very, very different out of this administration as they've signed 17 changes into this law, as we've seen these carve-outs, as we've seen them do things like make sure that the individual mandate is kept in place, but the other mandates are not put in. And I know my colleagues are here too, and I want to give them time. So I'm going to wrap up with this. And my friend from Missouri, thank you for doing this. It's time that we do make those substantive changes and restore some faith. Restore some faith with the American people, that we have their best interests, and make sure that Congress can live under the same laws that they vote for and that they pass for. And with that, I appreciate you having this conversation tonight.
Thank you very much, Bill. Those were very eloquent remarks. You really brought home the need that is time for solutions and all the challenges that we're facing. Before I go to my other friends here, I do want to get this motion in. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the subject of my special order.
Without objection.
Thank you. And now I want to go to Keith Rothfuss from Pennsylvania, who's new here, but boy, he hit the ground running, and appreciate your leadership, Keith. What would you like to share tonight?
I thank the gentlelady for organizing this talk. Pennsylvania's 12th district in western Pennsylvania stretches from Beaver to Johnstown and through the northern suburbs of Pittsburgh. And last week we had a visit from HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, who was in town to tout the benefits of the health care law. And she also attempted to help to enroll some western Pennsylvanians in the exchanges. According to press reports, however, those who showed up were not able to enroll or even access the website. Apparently, glitches were to blame. As reported in yesterday's New York Times, however, one industry source says these are not glitches. The extent of the problems is pretty enormous. It's awful. These problems took more than 2 years to build and cost the American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. The health care law's troubles aren't limited, however, to the website issues. Many western Pennsylvanians have reached out to me to share stories about how they are seeing their hours reduced or losing their jobs. Other western Pennsylvanians are seeing their health care premiums go up or losing coverage altogether. A woman recently got in touch with me and told me that her family recently received a letter from their insurance company, and they'll lose the health insurance they've had for more than 25 years on December 31st. The alternatives they've been able to find will cost them 3 times what they pay today. Mr. Speaker, it is a time for solutions. We do have a new solution that we're proposing, the American Health Care Reform Act, which will actually lower costs. And I encourage our colleagues across the aisle and in our conference to take a look at that. And I thank the gentlelady and yield back.
Thank you very much, Keith. Good point there. And now I'd like to go to a friend from Kentucky, Andy Barr.
Well, I want to thank the gentlelady from Missouri and for her leadership in leading this special order. Many Americans watching on TV right now are frustrated. They're angry with what they're seeing in Washington. They don't understand why political conflict has to get in the way of solutions. They're saying to all of us, Why are the politicians putting their political agendas ahead of what is good for the country? And I share that frustration and anger, and I understand what they're saying. They're saying, why can't the politicians get their act together? Why can't they reopen the government and avert default? But you know, as important as it is to reopen the government, and as important as it is to avert a short-term default, and those are very critical, it's equally important that we stop business as usual in Washington. It is important that members of Congress do what they were elected to do, which is exercise leadership, stand up for what is right and what is in the long-term best interest of the nation. And what is in the long-term best interest of the nation is to stop spending money we don't have. It's to stop racking up mountains of debt, to end the reckless practices in Washington that are literally mortgaging the future of our children and our grandchildren and pushing this country to the brink of national bankruptcy. Now, some have accused House Republicans of holding the country hostage solely for the purpose of repealing or defunding the president's signature legislative achievement, Obamacare. Why is this relevant? The president says Obamacare should not be part of any negotiations to fund the government or raise the debt limit. But my constituents in Kentucky recognize the president's health care law for what it actually is, which is a massive increase in federal spending. Its projected cost has more than doubled since the president originally claimed it would reduce the deficit. It will cost American taxpayers $2 trillion over the next decade, and its true cost will continue to grow. Obamacare was ran through Congress on a partisan basis through a process that was specifically reserved for budget-related bills, the reconciliation process. So for anyone to suggest that Obamacare is unrelated to the budget is both cynical and inconsistent with Congress's ongoing responsibility to scrutinize federal spending. After racking up $7 trillion in debt in just 5 years, the president stubbornly refuses to negotiate over Obamacare. But make no mistake, Congress would not be doing its job if it ignored Obamacare and its massive cost in the ongoing debate about how to save America from bankruptcy. So, Mr. Speaker, let me just conclude by saying this. It would be unfair for young people and the next generation if we simply raise the debt limit without also addressing the underlying cause of our problems, without also addressing the cause of our fiscal situation, and that is runaway government spending. This is our opportunity. This is our moment. Let's seize this opportunity on a bipartisan basis. It is time for solutions. I thank the gentlelady for her leadership in this special order. Let's not just raise the debt limit and keep kicking the can down the road. Let's solve America's problem and finally force the government to live within its means. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.